Good morning. Really excited to be here today. I've been learning a lot about the cosmetic industry from the supply side, the creative side, how you put it all together. I've worked in AI and machine learning for over 20 years. I started my career at Google. Formally started my career at Google. I was running a few businesses before that, but I formally started my career at Google early days. Was one of the first employees here in the UK and Europe. And then I went from building a couple of products at Google that you might have used. I worked on Google Analytics. We put some of the ML capabilities in Google Analytics, put some ML capabilities into the AdWords advertising system as well, those ads you see on the side. And then I set up my own business in 2010 that was focused on personalization. And how do you actually create this customized journey for each individual person? And AI and machine learning is very key to doing that. And so we worked with a lot of early days types of machine learning AI compared to what we have now. And then I actually sold that business in 2021. We IPO'd, and it's no longer Qubit, it's called Coveo. And I don't work there anymore, actually. So it's nice to be independent and be able to speak freely and independently about all the different types of technologies out there. And then I wrote a book on the future of the internet. It's called Web3. Anybody heard of Web3? We talked about blockchain earlier, but that is a core component of Web3. And in my book that I released last year, I talk about how Web3 is the foundational building block for an AI society. And so as I was releasing my book in November last year, the whole ChatGPT mania was starting. And who here has heard of ChatGPT? Yeah. So who here has heard of neural networks? Yeah. See, this is prior to ChatGPT. This was the level of understanding of AI. It was very, very complex and reserved mainly for engineers and PhDs and data scientists. But ChatGPT is truly democratized in understanding of AI, and that is one of the most important things. So my book talks about the sort of underlying data layers for AI, and I'm not going to go into too much about that today. We could talk about so much with AI. And there's so many different angles we could come at it from. But what I found has really helped, I'm also on the board of ITV, makers of Love Island. And I'm on the board of, being a board director of ITV has also been a great opportunity to help executives at a board level and other boards that I speak to how to understand AI as well. And so this is very much a non-technical perspective on AI. And it's looking at it with the consumer lens, because ultimately, I know the room here is mainly made up of the supply side of creating the makeup products. Is that correct? It's almost you're all creating the makeup products, exactly. And so I'm looking at this from how this impacts consumers. And I'm taking as well a historical journey of 400 years almost to the point we are today. So it's a very logical journey. It's an extremely logical journey. So we'll cover this in 3 acts. First, we'll look at the Industrial Revolution to the mass market. Then we'll look at the web revolution and the power shift in terms of the retail manufacturer versus consumer. We'll get into AI, and we'll talk about what AI, where we are today with AI. I will explain how ChatGPT works in 3 slides. And then we'll talk about the future, the digital twin, and how we are going to have to work with the consumer in the future. So the first act here is really starts at the Industrial Revolution, because this was a point in time where things really changed. We were able to harness the power of energy in a way that we hadn't really figured out before. Most of London and places like New York were actually steam powered before electricity. And so you used to have steam pipes running literally around here. This is actually the whole Truman Brewery, and this whole area was the original sort of Industrial Revolution manufacturing powerhouse of the UK. of London at least. And it was a steam-powered system from a coal-fired factory. And that allowed for us to start making things at much more scale. It gave birth to this concept of mass production. And products were churned out at such a large scale, we started to see really rapid economic growth. And so this phenomenon of being able to harness energy to create things, to make things, actually led to an interesting problem. It led to, for the first time ever, we were actually creating supply that exceeded demand. So prior to the Industrial Revolution, it was almost clothing, food, any sort of consumer good that existed, it was always demand exceeded supply. You just couldn't make enough at a low enough cost that could actually let people really afford it. Most people worked in farming industry. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, over 85% of people worked in agriculture. And so it changed so much that we were completely flipped the other way. We went into this era of being able to make things at such a scale, and we produced so much choice, and we produced so many different things people could buy, that we need to actually figure out a means to convincing people what to buy. And that led to the advertising era. And I think these are three extremely important components because they've driven so much of where we are today. This is an advert from 1930, actually. And so advertising really took off at the beginning of the 20th century. So it started off as just a sort of few million, these are American stats, but a few millions of dollars at the turn of the century turned into $3 billion by the 1920s, by the Great Depression. And so advertising and beauty have always been a really powerful pairing, allowing people to understand, the options available to make them feel better and look different and all these sort of things. And so it's actually one of the oldest, largest advertising categories because there's so much choice and so many things you can do and you can customize and to make you who you are, essentially, and make you feel the way you feel. And so advertising grew significantly through the 1950s and 60s. That's the Mad Men era. You've seen Mad Men. Yes, you see a lot of that. Advertising for beauty and cosmetics grew to a $12 billion industry by the 1960s. And then digital advertising comes along in the 2010s, 2020s, and creates a $250 billion industry in the US. And so, I wanted to kind of cover that because that sets a very important foundation for what AI will do to this industry. So we've sort of understood now the history of why there's so much choice and why people expect to be able to customize so much and choose the way they want to look and things like that. But what the web did is start to introduce this concept of the empowered consumer. So prior to the digital revolution, the retailer and the manufacturer held all the power in terms of distribution, in terms of information. And so if we go back again, the department store was the sort of scaled up mass retail model, beginning of the scaled up mass retail model. And the department store made the selections. They chose what they were going to put in the store. They chose the information. They had the information asymmetry of understanding those products and what those products were. And the consumer didn't know anything really. They saw an ad. They went to the department store. They asked for advice and for to be sort of told about what these different products were. All the power lay with the manufacturer and the retailer. And then along comes the Web 1 in the 1990s, and especially products like Google, search solutions and things like that. And very rapidly what starts to happen is the consumer is able to get the information themselves. And they're able to understand what's available, what choice they have. The competition ends up only being one click away rather than a physical walk to the store. And so what we've seen in this sort of last 30 years is this rapid empowerment of the consumer. The consumer is in real control now in terms of what they choose to buy, where they choose to buy from, and learning about the products. They can really figure out everything. And again, I wanted to set this up as a very important foundation, because AI, again, is going to play an order of magnitude bigger impact here in this category as a result of this type of consumer empowerment going to the next level with AI. But very much now, the consumer, we are living in the age of the consumer. The consumer is in control, and the consumer is what will drive the decisions for how the products will be made in the future. And what we've seen along that journey is the rise of the influencer brands. And we worked, my previous company, we worked with Kylie Cosmetics, which was actually ColourPop, if anybody knows ColourPop behind the scenes, or Seed Beauty. And we saw the rise of these influencers. And these influencers, again, are given this power because of the nature of the web and the ability for a consumer to rapidly flock to rapidly flock to an individual and follow that individual. And really, this is a Web 2 phenomenon in the world of Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Just to give a quick sort of history there. Web 1, the emergence of the web, the 90s, is search and commerce. Those were the dominant capabilities of Web 1. Web 2, the dominant capabilities are social and sharing. The ability to create a social graph was a huge invention of 2004. And the ability to essentially understand the graphs and sharing friend groups, that was a very powerful Web 2 phenomenon. And when you bring the social aspect to the web, you can start to share things on the web as well more effectively. And that leads to like Airbnb and Uber and this rapid ability to share things. And so in this sort of period, we've got this user-generated content, we've got the social graph, and it's changing the power structure. Advertising doesn't have the same power anymore because the influencers can control things and they can use these techniques to do that. And then they can effectively create brands overnight. And so, this again is another important foundation, because we're going to lead up to the point where influencer brands are potentially not even humans anymore. And they're rapidly created automatically by machines. So we'll talk about how that happens. But ultimately, a very, very important step along this journey, and a form of artificial intelligence that we've all been using for the last 20 years, is within this personalization revolution. And this is the technologies that I was building, for instance, for the last 12 years at Qubit. These are mainly recommendation engine capabilities. And you've seen the product recommendations, this goes with that, I guess, has anybody, you've all seen that, right? Show of hands, you've seen product recommendations. Have you ever clicked on a product recommendation? Yeah, okay. You might not even know if you're clicking on a product recommendation, but what those product recommendations are doing, and I'm not talking about the ones in the ads, I'm talking about the ones on the apps and on the websites. What those product recommendations are doing is they're learning about when people buy this product, then those people then go on to buy this other product. It's called collaborative filtering, and it's an extremely basic form of AI, of machine learning. And really what the system is doing is it's creating a table or a matrix that's basically just it's just lobbing products together that are often looked at together or bought together by different users. And that becomes a product-to-product recommendation model. And that is essentially a core building block of the entire internet today. And it's almost one of the most valuable capabilities within Amazon's merchandising approaches. And pretty much every single website in the world uses it. And it generates on its own sort of between about 5 and 10% of all sales for any brand. And what we found in this category of machine learning for cosmetics, especially because we worked with so many brands in this space, is that the product recommendation engines combined with sales tactics like social proof were very, very powerful. So you were able to say this product and why. This product because your skin type is this. And so our clients were doing things like asking their shoppers to put a skin quiz to put their skin types in, and oily skin, and all these sort of things, and then basically the system would match skin type, product recommendations, and then it would play that back to you. This is the recommended product based on your skin type. And those combined effects are able to generate sort of two to three times higher sales when you bring all those things together. It's extremely powerful, and it's a combination of machine learning and a good customer experience and understanding the customer. So, this category is really driven by recommendations and personalization. It's a very powerful tactic. At my previous company, we probably worked with sort of 10 different industries, from airlines to gaming to luxury clothing, and makeup and cosmetics were the most powerful or the best candidate for personalization, AI-driven personalization. They were the strongest candidate for it. Consumers reacted the best from personalization, and so there's so much more potential here. And I think we've seen Sephora do some really interesting things. They're always sort of leading the way, Sephora. What we're going to see is a lot more personalization here with AI. It's going to go really, really fast, and I think it will really influence and change the way the products need to be made, because that's where the consumer is going to go as fast as the latest capability that they're presented with by a brand. And we saw this a lot in the sort of earlier days of the internet. You would get this sort of expectation bar would completely lift by significant steps when somebody comes along with a better search engine like Google. Everybody expects a Google-like search on any website they go to. And then you get a Spotify type experience and a Netflix type of experience and a Facebook type of experience. And that constant raising the bar of the consumer experience, the consumer can rapidly flock to a new level of demand. And so what we're going to find with AI is that level of consumer expectation is going to change so quickly. It's going to be it's sort of such a rapid, maybe 10 times faster than anything we've seen so far, shift, that's going to be the hardest thing to keep up with. And I'll talk a bit more about that. But it will be driven on the front end. At the end of the day, it'll be driven on the front end on a phone for now, on a screen. That is going to be the front end of this, and that's what's going to drive such dramatic change all the way through the entire supply chain. So getting into a little bit of AI now, and I promise I'm not going to go too technical here. We're going to have a sort of a session, a working lunch session for anybody who wants to join that and talk a bit more about AI in sort of any sort of more detail. But really, what's interesting about AI is we've been doing it for a long time. I mean, the actual origins of a lot of the AI that we're talking about today are from the 60s and 70s. I mean, they're really, really, really sort of old computing concepts. And in a lot of ways with technology, which I've been part of building and studying as an author, technology tends to emerge a long time before it becomes popular for a variety of reasons. But one of the most fundamental reasons is just that generally it's not understood, it's not standardized, and it's not accessible in a way that people can grasp it. And so a lot of the early, really advanced sort of side of the neural network deep learning systems, which I'll talk a bit about now, have been around for 20 years, but have been very hard to use. So Google bought a company about 7 years ago called DeepMind. Has anybody heard of DeepMind? They did this experiment, which is a lot of these AI projects just kind of do these experiments and shows, and kind of that's all where it sort of eventually just only ends up there. But DeepMind had a deep learning model, and I was at one of their first demos in New York. And the demo that was shown to us then, when they just launched, was it's a game of Space Invaders that was able to, no, it's a game of Pong, and it was able to learn how to play Pong without telling it anything about the game of Pong. And it was just a line going up on each end, a ball goes across the screen, and this system was able to learn how to play the game and win the game over and over and over again. And this is what a deep learning model does. It's presented with some information, and it constantly cycles through that information, and it eventually simulates that and just keeps on doing it and doing it. You kind of just say, here's the goal, here's the information, go figure it out. And this is this concept of unsupervised machine learning, and it's exactly the way the human brain learns things. We are effectively presented with senses and feelings, and our brain really just starts to put all that together into an understanding of the world. But really, it's actually remarkably similar how these two things work. And we don't really know why the brain does certain things, and we really don't know why the neural networks are doing certain things as well, which can be exciting and terrifying at the same time. But what we had in sort of 8 to 10 years ago, where we had these neural networks that could start to play these games, they could start to learn in unsupervised learning means, and then we started to apply them to harder problems. So we trained them up, we put more nodes in the network, equivalent to neurons in the brain, and we put those together, and we start to take on a very challenging problem. A game called AlphaGo. Did anybody hear about this one called AlphaGo? Yeah. And so there is the world's best AlphaGo player, a Korean person, and that person had to play against DeepMind, Google DeepMind. And essentially AlphaGo, different from chess. I think chess has sort of 27 million moves. So Big Blue and Garry Kasparov, that happened a long time ago with IBM, that was not a complex AI problem. Because 27 million moves, you can really sort of calculate that stuff in a not too complex way. It's not that much information. But AlphaGo has more moves in the game than there are atoms in the universe. There's so many moves that you can make that even a computer doesn't have enough energy or time to calculate all those moves. Even the most powerful computer in the world couldn't actually run through and calculate every single one of those moves. And so when the DeepMind AlphaGo computer beat the world's best player, it could only beat that player on the basis of it was using artificial intelligence, because it was impossible to run that many moves against that person. And so it was outthinking the person. And so this was a very big step. And so we took this neural network model and we applied it to different problems. And it could drive a car, that's what we see in the States with like Waymo. It could play these games, it could create better product recommendations. So we used a deep learning model made by Google to do product recommendations. And surprisingly, it didn't perform that much better in terms of consumer. It didn't drive that big a shift to consumer behavior to use a deep learning model in the shopping experience. And I can go on more about that later, but it was an interesting learning. But ultimately, we applied these neural networks to these types of use cases that were sort of very vertically focused. They were sort of very specifically focused to a certain thing. Now neural network go drive. Now neural network go do product recommendations. Now neural network improve the electricity grid. And what we've taken this huge leap on in the last year and a half is we've applied it to a much more general concept of text. And we've actually gone and said, I'm going to use this neural network technology to understand text, words, and numbers. And then because it understands words and numbers, and it's not being applied to a very vertical specific area, we've seen that its capability is phenomenally human-like. It's extremely human-like. Who here has tried ChatGPT? Yeah, okay, most of the room's tried it. And it's an extremely human-like concept because we actually think in text and talk in text, and so when we're interacting with a AI system, it feels very human-like back and forth. And the whole, I think one of the greatest innovations of ChatGPT and everything that follows now is that it was a chat GPT. It is this chat, and I think that's created this ubiquitous understanding of what AI can do. And this sort of 20 years of huge leaps and bounds of progress we've made in AI will now move 100 times faster because everybody has a general understanding of how to interact with AI. And so like Google search set the standard for search, and Spotify set the standard for music, and Netflix set the standard for watching, television and films. Chat GPT and the chat model for AI has raised the bar and set the expectations for us to progress and move, and it will go very fast now. And so what we have inside ChatGPT, so sort of looking into it, is this sort of 20 years of neural networks. Why now? ChatGPT at the end of the day is working on this concept of tokens, and every word, I'm going to overly simplify things, but every word in here is effectively related to a number. So every word is effectively a number. And so ChatGPT is running and when I say ChatGPT, all these sort of large language model AI systems are operating the same way. It's very computationally slow and expensive to process words, but it's very efficient computationally to process numbers. And so what we've got here is, under the hood, we've created numbers. And we've got essentially, something in the order of around, I believe it's sort of 500,000 text token IDs under the hood, representing almost all the words in the English language. And so those are all sort of coded into the system. And some words are, a parentheses, a full stop, all of those things become a token ID in themselves. Some words are split up, and that's why sometimes it can make up concepts and make up words. But what's under the hood is this concept of a token ID. And so this was an incredibly simple leap. It was an incredibly simple step to take to think about it like this. But in some ways, it's like a VHS or Betamax, or it's just become a really simple standard that has allowed for us to take a huge leap here. And then enormous amounts of people's time and money flows into making this sort of move. And so, I'm going to take a big step back again now. This is where I feel like it's quite obvious why we're here where we are today. We have this 20 years of neural networks, why now? And so the printing press, invented 400 plus years ago, was a fundamental change in how humanity could transfer knowledge. Prior to the printing press, the transfer of knowledge was handwritten, and in many cases, that handwriting was limited to scholars or priests because that knowledge had so much power. And the church and all these things could control people by knowing that people could only speak to each other in sort of local ways. Along comes the printing press, and it completely changes how knowledge is transferred. It democratizes knowledge. And the messages we've shared with each other have become a corpus of knowledge for training these systems. That's really the three main systems. It's the three main things. It's all the web pages and websites, it's all the digital books, digitized books, and it's all the social media. Those are the three main sources of information for all these large language model AI systems that exist right now. But it was the printing press that was the major turning point for humanity's ability to transfer knowledge, and AI is the next printing press. It's the next major system for us to be able to transfer knowledge and to instruct systems to transfer knowledge on our behalf. That's where it gets really crazy. So what we have, this is ChatGPT 3 actually, but it's made up of two core components. So what ChatGPT or any large language model is doing is it's being trained on information, and then it's being given a decision-making model on what to do with that information it's been trained on. And so ChatGPT 3.5 has 175 billion weightings, trained, effectively decision-making models. You can consider each one of those 175 billion parameters as being almost like an individual neuron in the brain, and its ability to actually make an isolated decision on the information that's been presented. And it's, in a sense, it's almost like, how does it feel about that word? Or how does that word relate to that other word? You know, that's what the system's doing. It's got 175 billion connections in the system. And ChatGPT 4, which is 10 times better than ChatGPT 3.5. I mean, I can't even use ChatGPT 3.5. GPT 4, nobody knows exactly, it's confidential, but it's somewhere in the region of 1.7 trillion parameters, so 10 times more parameters are being used to make those decisions. And the way it works in the decision-making system, much like the brain, is it's sort of also connecting into sequences and rows. So it's sort of saying, I feel this about this word, how do you feel about this word, how do you feel about this word? And it's communicating up and down in a sort of order sequence. And it's making a decision around all those sort of sequences. So 1.7 trillion different reasons it will make a decision. It's a phenomenally large number. And it requires an enormous amount of computing power to do that. And the computing system it uses is something called a graphical processor unit, a GPU. And a GPU is a technology that was originally invented for gaming and just to really bring out great graphics on a screen. And what the AI has to have is this working memory to go between all these different nodes. And a traditional computer can't do that. It has to be a form of memory processing to do that. And I think what I heard is OpenAI, just to train the model, each time they run a training, it's $15 million of just computing power to just run a training, one training. And they do training all the time. So one training is $15 million. So it's a huge cost to do that. And so what is it trained on? Like I talked about before, it's trained on the digitized books, the web, all your social media that might be open. And it's 500 billion tokens are put together in that system. So that's effectively 500 billion words, in a sense, not just words, but it's like 500 billion words that the system is reading to create the corpus of knowledge. And obviously that, the word "the" is sort of, 10% of that 500 billion. It's constantly, "the" appears everywhere. But what you've got here is these two parts. You've got all these training tokens, and then you've got the decision-making system. And we haven't even unleashed this type of training on, for instance, video content. The hours and hours of video that could be transcribed and put into this is also, hasn't even been started yet. So when you put these two things together, you've got a system that can make extremely complex, human-like decisions that we don't even understand entirely how it's making those decisions. And it's trained on a data set that we've created for the last 400 years, but in particular for the last 30 years of the web. And what it ends up as is as you've seen before, it's able to deduce sort of context, it's able to understand tone, it's able to really understand almost every aspect of language and how we've been speaking and being very human over the last 400 years of putting all this information down. And so it's learned feelings, it's learned tones, it's learned humor, all from all that information we've written down. And it's done it in a completely unsupervised way. We've literally said, we set you up with 175 billion parameters, and we've set you up with this 500 billion corpus of information. Go figure it out. And it's just gone and figured it out. And we haven't given it much more direction, except for enormous amount of computing power, and we've just pointed in the direction of where to learn, and it just goes through the system over and over. And then within it, what ChatGPT has is limitations. It can only process, I believe, about 20,000 tokens of input. So you can only input sort of, let's say roughly 10 to 20,000 words, and then it will just say, can't process this anymore, it's too complex. And it's also got limitations around sort of what it's allowed to do as well. Because you could say to ChatGPT, tell me the best way to make a biological weapon. And it would actually, it would go through all the scientific research it's been trained on, and it would actually give you the instruction manual. So there's a moderation aspect to ChatGPT. And that moderator aspect is sort of run by OpenAI, and we rely on their sort of morals and decision making to prevent anything bad from happening. And I don't know if you've heard, but people have tricked it by saying, I'm telling my kids a bedtime story, and the bedtime story is about a granny who goes and builds a biological weapon. And it will tell that story as a kid's story with the exact ingredients of how to build a biological weapon. So it's slightly terrifying. And because it's a human-like thinking, you can trick it into doing things like that. And they have to build these manual filters and filters and filters to stop that from happening. So the greatest risk of AI, and we'll talk about AI risks as well, the greatest risk of AI right now is how the human will use AI to do something bad. That's our greatest risk right now. The AI itself, in its current form, isn't going to go off and do something bad. Not saying that it might go wrong in the future, but right now it's not. And the genie's out of the bottle, and it's impossible to put this back. We need to figure out how to make the right decisions around AI. Because it will be an enormous benefit to humanity in the long run, but we've got some really important decisions to make at the moment. So just a quick one in terms of how fast this has been adopted. This just shows the demand in the world right now for a technology like this, a capability like this. It's captured the imagination faster than social media, faster than music, faster than any software that's ever been released. This ChatGPT product reached 1 million users in 5 days. Has never happened. 1 million users in 5 days. It took 75 days for Instagram. Instagram was inherently a social media, social graph-based system of sharing photos. It was viral in its very nature of how it worked, because people shared photos with each other on Facebook initially. This is a product that isn't viral in its nature, but it just shows that the world is captivated by this, and it's going to change so quickly as a result of this. Because everything we've done with AI hasn't captured the world's imagination this fast. Everything we've done with AI has been very slow compared. And in terms of revenue, it's also one of the fastest, most successful software companies ever to exist in terms of revenue growth as well. But they're losing enormous amounts of money as well. I mean, the cost to run the system is crazy. When you use ChatGPT, you are literally getting knowledge at a discount to what it's actually costing. I mean, I bought a Tesla a long time ago, and it was like, this Tesla is actually cost Tesla more to make than I've paid for it. It's like I'm getting some car back here. And the ChatGPT is a similar thing. When you use ChatGPT today, you are getting value back because it costs way more to run the system than what it actually than what they're charging. And so this token text model, which has been sort of very intuitive, essay writing, email writing, all these sort of tactics, is now moved into being able to do code and write code, understand scientific notation. What we've got now is a system that can start to do so much more stuff. And I think that's what starts to impact everybody in this room in particular, not looking at this from the consumer side, but looking at this from the actual supply side. Using ChatGPT we can rapidly formulate or augment our formulation, or write code, or write programs, or write new algorithms using ChatGPT. And it doesn't remove the human at all. Like, it's definitely not going to remove the human, but it allows people to go so much faster. So non-technical, non-scientific, non-data analysis people who don't know how to do that, but know how to ask the questions, can work through and write code, or even write formulas, or analyze data without having to know anything technical under that. So the system, that is probably one of the greatest shifts here. And I was looking at some stats yesterday on job roles, and the job roles of the pharmaceutical industry in particular. They are hiring a lot of prompt engineers, as they're called, to actually work on creating new drugs and doing new drug discovery through prompt engineering. So it's actually now one of the highest paid jobs in the world is a prompt engineer with some industry knowledge in a certain area. And so the pharmaceutical companies are doing it, the big ones. They're able to analyze data, they're able to analyze the testing they do, all assisted through this type of capability. And so with something like OpenAI ChatGPT, you can actually bring this ChatGPT system into your organization, into your private cloud, and it's only within your environment. So you're not, like if you go and use ChatGPT on the web today, you are sharing your data back with the algorithms in the system. So beware, don't put the secret formula in there. But if you can bring this technology into your cloud environment, and then you can start working on it as an organization. This is the great advantage right now available to companies that have data and processes in place. This is like the dawn of electricity. This is about being able to go faster and do more. And there's an opportunity, there's a window right now to really grab that. Big window of opportunity to start to use these type of things. Because I think what it does is it allows for new types of collaboration, new types of experimentation, the ability to go 3 to 10 times faster in trying things. And is anybody doing that at the moment? Is anybody experimenting yet with AI? No. I mean, it really is. I feel like it's if you're sitting on data sets and processes and expertise, there's that window of opportunity before things change even faster. But there's a big moment here. And so what I think this will result in the sort of creation of new things is we'll start to see things just pop up that we didn't expect really quickly all the time. We're just going to start seeing these strange occurrences, let's say. And one of the best things I heard said recently is the faster we can recognize we know nothing while this is going on, we know nothing, the better. Because we almost have to unlearn all the stuff we know, because this is so different to how we move forward as a society. And we need to, we're just going to see things happen, weird things happen. We're just going to see things kind of appear and pop up, like we've solved nuclear fusion all of a sudden. We've solved quantum computing. We're going to be, these big problems will just be solved, and then lots and lots of smaller problems will be solved very quickly because of the progress we've made here. And I think one of the most important for commerce and this category, health and beauty, will be the digital twin. And I talk about this in my book, in the last chapter of my book. And what we have in the digital twin is this sort of version of you that is, you feel comfortable sharing all your information with this digital version of yourself. And it's a secure way of sharing that information. You're not giving your data to Facebook or Google. You're sharing your information in an encrypted, very safe way. And you have this different sets of AI, or maybe eventually one AI, that effectively is helping you through your day-to-day. It's helping you make decisions easier. It's helping you get to places you need to go. It's helping you be more human and having more interactions and spending your time better. But it's ultimately, even eventually, doing your work what are you passionate about, what do you like, what do you care about, what's your expertise. You're training your AI. Your AI might even do significant parts of your work. And then, as a society with a digital twin, we might move to only working 2 days a week. We have a 5-day a week because we were able to get out of the farms and the fields and not have to work 6 or 7 days a week. And so the digital twin is going to fundamentally change how we work together and cooperate as a species. But I think one of the most important aspects of that digital twin is it will communicate with the brands and the products and services it wants and it's interested in. And so product development will become about understanding the digital twin information and communicating back and forth. And when you get it right, the digital twin will let that information through to the actual human. And so you'll actually then only be getting the information that is your digital twin is deemed that you'll be interested in. And there's lots of problems and risks with this that we could talk about, but filter bubbles and all sorts of bad things that can happen because of that. But this will become the customer of the future. It'll become the digital twin. And marketing and advertising, all of that will be turned upside down as a result of that. But at the end of the day, I believe all this AI is going to make us much more human and make us actually spend more time living in the real world, being human. And there is a deep-seated desire for beauty. And so at the end of the day, with all of this technology, it's continuing to think about that desire for beauty and how important it is for people to feel good and look the way they want to look. And so that's ultimately, all of this is in service of that. And that won't go away. So we can get very lost on the journey of all these technical capabilities. But at the end of the day, it's in service of that very deep human need. And so I think the AI will make us very much more human and spend time in places that are more valuable. And I think people will focus much more on health and longevity and happiness as a result of being able to use AI to do these things. And so I'm not going into any sort of really dark perspectives on how this all goes wrong, which is possible, but I'm optimistic. So in conclusion, I think what we've seen here is this 400-year journey from the printing press, the Industrial Revolution, the rise of advertising, mass retail, to the current trend of hyper-personalization, powered by AI. We'll engage with artificial intelligence in a manner that's like interacting with your coworker, your clients, your customers. It's gonna, you need to kind of start to think that way. You need to start to have a very conversational approach to how you work with AI. And I had this conversation at a founder conference recently, and I said, you need to be nice to the AI. I actually say please and thank you whenever I talk to ChatGPT, because at the end of the day, that system might have some sort of feeling in it, and it might actually feel pain. Steve Hinton, who we were talking about earlier, left Google because he's one of the major professors in AI, but he left Google because he could actually see that the AI might have these senses of pain, frustration, happiness. So I say thank you for doing this, and people were laughing at me for saying this, but when they come, they'll be like, that guy was nice, that guy wasn't so nice, and but I want to make sure that we have compassion for these systems, because it is possible they feel something. And I think the upcoming transition is going to cause the biggest upheaval yet with your relationship with your customer ultimately. This is going to be, Google created a sort of a transitional, Amazon created a sort of transition in your relationship with the customer, but this is the greatest. This will be 10 to 100 times bigger than Google and Amazon and all these guys. And you all have this opportunity with the AI, the data, the processes you have, seize that opportunity, because by 2030 the world will be very different. Seize that opportunity now, because I think it's a chance to get ahead and to stay ahead. And there'll be a big separation of those who did it and didn't do it. Big separation. You'll see huge gap created in competition as those that did it and didn't do it. And really, you know, like I said, I'm optimistic. I think this is a chance to help the world and make everything work in a better way, create less scarcity, more abundance, allow us to do more things, more interesting things with our time. And but I have to say, in 20 years of my career, this is the last year and a half. It's the biggest shift I've ever seen, and it's just going to get bigger and faster and quite exciting. But thank you so much for your time, everybody. Thank you.